Not all divorces are created equal. We want yours to be as pain-free as possible. And there's a lot that you can do in advance to help that. Hi, this is Ruby Bolton, and welcome to another episode of Divorce Decoded, where we explore what can go wrong in a divorce and what you can do to help it go right. So, a lot of times, one of the things that you can do to help your divorce the most is to think about it before you file. Now, a lot of times when people come in to see us, they've already been served or they've already announced to their spouse that they're getting divorced and everything's already in motion. And some of these things are too late. We want to back up a little and let's look at what you can do before that first legal piece of paper is filed to help your divorce go more smoothly. So, the first thing that I'm going to say, and if you listen to us a lot, you might kind of get tired of me saying it, but it leads to so many things. It's helpful in so many areas. And that is avoid toxicity. And by that, I mean, don't do anything to ratchet up the tensions even more. If you know that you're going to get divorced, you want to be polite to your spouse. Don't call them those names. Don't tell them everything they've done to screw up your life and why they're the worst thing that ever happened to you. I know you think that, and it might even be true, but it's not going to help you go through the process, and it's not going to help with the emotions involved in the divorce. And it's definitely not going to keep your costs down. It will make your divorce more expensive. It will make it take longer. It will be more emotionally draining if you just empty everything you're feeling out on your spouse. If you can at all, be polite. If you must, be distant. If you must, text and read every text before you send it. But try to keep your conversations as cordial and polite as you can. So, the next thing that I would tell you to do if you're facing divorce, well, maybe you're polite, maybe you're cordial, but you don't trust your spouse to be. And I will say that that's true. A lot of people react very badly to being told that their spouse is about to file for divorce. So before you have those conversations, especially if your spouse is volatile, especially if they have a history of being vindictive or a history of being punitive or try to make sure that everything's even all the time, before you have that conversation, take things that are of particular sentimental value to you and get them out of the house. Get them out of your car. Make sure those items, that, you inherited or your early diaries or pictures of yourself as a baby or, you know, anything that is special and important to you, and you think to yourself, I could never replace that, and get it out of the home. That way, you don't need to worry about your spouse maybe not taking the news as well as they could. So, the next thing that you should do before you file for divorce, change your passwords. In fact, not only do I want you to change your passwords, I want you to change your security questions. Now, these days, we get a lot of two-factor authentication, and people start to feel pretty secure that nobody can get in except for them. Well, phones are pretty easy to clone, and then they're getting the same messages that you're getting. I would prefer that you use biometrics or you change your passwords because, as your attorney, for one, I want to be able to communicate with you in a secure manner, knowing that nobody else is going to be reading it. And chances are there's people that you'd like to have conversations with that you are confident are private as well. My office is in Montgomery County, Texas. And in Montgomery County, we have what are called standing orders. And that means nobody has to go to ask the judge for an order. The second a divorce is filed, there's an order that goes into place that affects both parties in a divorce. Now, of course, the party that's being filed on might not know it's in place till they get served, so they can't really get in trouble for violating it. But if you're the one filing for divorce, the judge is going to expect you to read it before you file. They're going to expect you to be familiar with what you're prohibited from doing. So what are you prohibited from doing? Well, you're not allowed to cancel credit cards that your spouse's name is on. You're not allowed to take them out off of accounts. You're not allowed to change the locks on the doors. So what can you do if you know that you're about to file for divorce and you don't want to run afoul of the court's orders? Well, in some cases, I'm going to tell you to take those actions early. So, for instance, let's say your spouse moved out of the house 6 months ago and they don't live there anymore and they're not coming back and forth. But when you file for divorce, you're concerned they might. Well, change the locks before we file. There's nothing prohibiting you from doing it before divorce is filed. And particularly if your spouse isn't even living there, there's nothing that's going to raise eyebrows about it. There's nothing that's going to send off alarm bells about it. So get it done first. Other things that I'd like you to do first, well, let's limit the liability that you have. I had a lot of people tell me that credit cards are in both names. I will tell you probably not. Probably one of you is the primary on the card, and the other person is simply an authorized user. There are some cards that are truly joint credit cards. I think I am aware of 9 or 10 banks in the United States really that do that. It is extremely rare. In almost all cases, one of you is the one who is legally obligated to pay the debt on the credit card, and the other person is simply an authorized user. So in a divorce, absolutely the judge can order either party to pay that debt. But guess what? If you have a credit card with Chase Bank doesn't care who the state of Texas says is responsible for that debt. They have a contract with one person, and that's the person that they're going after. So take a look at all the credit cards and debts that you have. Are they joint, or are they the responsibility of just one of you? And if possible, take steps to limit your liability, meaning that you don't want all the debt in your name. Because no matter what the court does, all those creditors, guess who they're coming after? They're coming after you. So if possible, the debt should be accumulated equally to both spouses. If that's not possible, let's at least start limiting the liability that you have. If you haven't filed for divorce, there is no reason that you have to legally give your spouse a credit card that attaches to your credit line. They can apply for and get their own. And before the divorce, you can cancel them as an authorized user and require that they get their own. And absolutely, I would advise you to limit your liability. So just let's take a look at all the different types of liabilities that we have. You even have liability for automatically recurring charges that are automatically going on one of your credit cards. Well, if you and your spouse know that you're not sure what's going to happen with your marriage and you're starting to separate your finances, don't forget all those recurring charges. Who are those recurring charges benefiting? How about toll tags? How about car insurance? So if you're looking at accounts where you have liabilities, don't forget internet accounts. Don't forget things like Venmo. Do both parties have access to Venmo that draws off one party's account? How about Amazon? Almost everybody has a credit card saved on Amazon. If both parties have access to it, do you want your credit card attached to it? Or are you going to wake up the day after your spouse finds out you're getting divorced to see a huge bill that's going to be attached to your name only? So, one of the other things that you can do to help prepare yourself financially for divorce, open a bank account in just your name. And you probably have automatic deposit at work. Have that automatic deposit go into the account that is just in your name. One of the things that you can do to help prepare yourself for divorce is make sure that you have copies of important financial documents. Do you have copies of real estate documents? Do you have copies of loans? Do you have credit card statements? Do you have a list of assets? Do you know all the brokerage accounts? If you are still in the marital home and you can make a list of the debts and assets of the estate, that is a great time to do so. Just make sure that you have copies of anything that is going to affect you or your partner financially in the past or in the future. I would encourage you also to make sure that you keep copies of your bank statements, download them, and keep them. I wish everyone would do this. The bank is only going to keep them for 7 years. And if you need to trace separate property, you're not going to be able to do it if you first find out that you're getting divorced 9 years into a marriage. At the end of every year, make one of the things you do, download copies of all of your checking account statements and saving them in an electronic file that you can access. The next thing that I would tell you to do to prepare yourself for divorce is be careful what you post on social media. That is going to haunt you. Don't post ugly things about your ex. Don't post things that will show that maybe if your children ran across them, they would be hurtful to them. Don't put things on there about your new relationship and how gorgeous your new boyfriend or girlfriend is. All of those things can drive up the toxicity of your divorce. They can harm efforts to resolve your financial issues. They can harm efforts to resolve how the two of you are going to agree on the care, custody, and support of your children in the future. Just keep in mind, if you would not read that post out loud to a judge or a jury or your almost ex, don't put it on social media. There is no such thing as private social media. The other thing that I would say is be very careful of what you say. So a lot of times I see people being careful about what they text or being careful about what they email people because they know that's in writing and they know that that can be pulled up. But then they don't care about what they say. Well, the state of Texas is what we call a one-party consent state, meaning that if somebody is tape recording a conversation that you have with them, that's legal as long as one person in the conversation is aware it's being recorded. So a long time ago, I would have said that be super careful if you're going to record anything because there is a huge ick factor, meaning that people resent, the courts and juries really resent somebody that would tape record conversations. I think that's kind of going away. At this point, people are getting really used to the idea that everybody's walking around with a tape recorder on them and anybody could record anything at any time. And I think we are really approaching a point at which there's almost no negative to having a conversation recorded unless you look bad in it. So, not just be careful what you write, don't just be careful what you post. I would also say be careful what you say because it's very likely that somebody's recording you. And if you say something that you will regret, it is going to come back to haunt. So, how else do you prepare for divorce? Don't talk to your children about it. And I know some of you really want to. And you want to tell your children what to expect. And you want to explain to your children how terrible the other parent has been to you and why you're driven to take this step. And I'm just going to tell you that the judge is not going to appreciate that. And if there are any issues in the future about the children, if you have said negative things about the other parent to the children, if you have been involving them in your divorce, if you have been asking them to help you collect evidence against the other parent, all of those things can come back to haunt you. So don't talk to your children about the divorce proceedings. Don't give them negative information about the other parent. In the eyes of the court, your own feelings and need to be understood or need to explain to the children is always second to the children's need to be a child and not to be involved in adult matters that are beyond their maturity and understanding. So, the next thing that I would like to see people do before they file for divorce is think really carefully about where they want to live when the divorce is over. Sometimes you might be in a relationship where you and your spouse know you're on troubled ground. Maybe you're trying to work things out. Maybe one of you really wants to move out of the area. Well, you remember what I said about Montgomery County standing orders? One of the things that it won't let you do is move the children out of where they're currently living. So, what does that mean for you? Well, for one thing, if you want to move the children and your spouse is not going to stop you, and maybe even they think they're okay with it, make that move before you get divorced. And on the flip side, if your spouse is talking about moving, taking the children for a long visit to their parents in New Jersey, maybe you need to have alarm bells going off real long and real hard. And you don't want to allow that to happen if the divorce court can prevent it. That's something you might want to sit down and talk with an attorney about. If you see your spouse making plans to move your children and you don't want them moved, you need an attorney. You need legal advice. And I would 100% tell you to go in and see somebody immediately, even if you desperately don't want to get divorced. Which brings me to my next point, which is, well, what about your children? What if you and your spouse don't agree on custody of the children? So there are some people that will tell you under no circumstances should you move out and away from your children if you want to have them in the end. And when I first began practicing, I felt that way. But I will tell you at this point, I have seen too many situations where families stay residing in the same household, having just terrible arguments that children should never, ever be exposed to. So I'm going to tell you, put your children first. Make sure that you are not having terrible, destructive arguments in front of them. And if possible, you do that without moving away from them. But if the only way that you can protect them from terribly harmful things is to move out yourself, go visit with an attorney immediately, but take steps to protect your children from that type of experience, because they won't forget it. Now, if there are not high conflict arguments and you want to end up with custody of your children, absolutely do not move away from them. Do not rent a place to live that cannot accommodate them. I see this where one parent will move out into a one-bedroom apartment And then they want to come back 4 months later and say, oh, I want custody of our 3 children. Really? You don't live with 3 children in a one-bedroom apartment? And clearly you made plans for your future that did not include them. So if all you really wanted was a place to get away for a few hours, maybe don't rent a one-bedroom apartment. If you are not having high conflict arguments in the family home, and you want to end up with the family home, and you want to end up with your children, stay with your children. Document what you do with them and the part that you play in their life. Make sure that if you're the one taking them to and from practice and you think you might be headed for a divorce, start keeping a diary of everything that you do with them. The days that you take them to school, the days that you stay home with them when they're sick, the days that you take them to ballet, the fact that you put them to bed. Keep a diary of things that the other parent does that indicate that they're not putting the needs of the children first. Now, I'm not saying that you stay in a relationship just gathering toxic data, but I am aware that a lot of people spend quite a bit of time really thinking hard about whether or not they're going to be filing. And if you're in that position, if you're sitting there and you're evaluating and you're thinking, it might help you to start keeping a journal of significant events and what they mean and who is taking care of the children and what steps are being taken that may be hurtful to them. So the other thing that I would warn you about is, let's say your spouse has absolutely unloaded on you in text messages. And just looking at those text messages makes you want to cry and you never want to see them again. Don't delete them. Don't delete them. They can be very important evidence in your divorce. It might be that the judge needs to see the hurtful things that your spouse says.